For more exclusive China news and in-depth analysis, tune in to China in Focus with Tiffany Meyer at 9 p.m. Eastern right here on NTD. The Treasury is sanctioning the president of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, for his role in the global illicit drug trade. Under President Petro, cocaine production in Colombia has exploded to record high rates. Petro has provided narco-terrorist organizations with benefits under President Trump's leadership. He says, "We will not tolerate Colombia trafficking drugs into our nation and poisoning Americans." And President Trump is saying that he is terminating trade negotiations with Canada over a TV ad campaign. Premier of Ontario, Canada, Doug Ford, says the controversial tariff ad will be paused after this weekend's World Series. Joining us to discuss is Fergus Hodgson, the director of Econ Americas and author of the book Financial Sovereignty for Canadians. So to start off, can we get your comments on what do you make of the president's reaction here to the ad?
Well, it's actually probably a smart move on his part because it gives him more leverage when the meetings happen in mid 2026. So basically, the Canadians are trying to soften Trump's stance, leading into those meetings, but Trump is basically saying, "I will not let you get any advantage before these meetings begin."
Well, I mean, I guess it looks like it's a smart move because Ford said, the Premier of Ontario, that trade talks can resume because they'll start pausing the ad on Monday. So I guess, was that a really heavy card that Trump played here, do you think, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, the truth is, in my opinion, the Ontario Premier was making a foolish decision because he is a hypocrite on this issue, that Canada has all sorts of protection of its own. So whenever they lash out or promote free trade, they're basically self-reporting themselves as impediments to free trade. And Canada has both impediments between the provinces and with the United States, famously the supply management system. Further, Canada has been the chief promoter of all sorts of social causes, environmental causes, worker rights within a quote-unquote trade agreement. These elements should not be there, and Canada has been leading the way on that. I've written on this and said that if Canada wants free trade, she should practice it.
So Fergus, at the core of this issue, it appears to be that ad involving Ronald Reagan and what he said about tariffs, right? So can I get your view on that as well? What is President Ronald Reagan's stance on tariffs? What is the context?
No, so people should take a look at that. It's actually very professionally done. The dispute is not over the words he said, but with the use and the editing, or let's say the selective editing of his words, because Ronald Reagan was explaining his use of tariffs against other nations, but in a very limited fashion. So Trump has said this himself, although we don't want to report all his words because they're not always consistent. But the position that Ronald Reagan was saying is that the ideal is free trade. Economists agree with this. Most policy researchers agree with this. The challenge is just how to engage in conflict or dispute with another nation without going to war. And often tariffs or trade impediments are tools that politicians have available to them that would be less destructive than others. So in this case, Donald Trump has said repeatedly that he wants Canada to be better in alignment with the United States and not with China. He wants them to have better resolution of narco trafficking, of illegal immigration. So there are issues of dispute. Further, Canada, as I've mentioned, has its own trade barriers that are hypocritical, and these are meaningful. It covers dairy, poultry, eggs. In my opinion, this pressure from Trump, the sort of upping the stakes or challenging the Canadian government, is actually healthy for Canada because it'll promote some introspection.
Okay, so on that point, you're saying it's healthy for Canada. Does this have any negative bearing at all whatsoever on U.S.-Canada relations?
Well, okay, so I want Canada to stop picking a fight with the United States and to accept or work with the United States as the chief ally. More than 3/4 of Canada's exports go to the United States. Canada is a heavily export-dependent nation. Canada has a heck of a lot to lose if these negotiations go sour. So all this grandstanding for ideological purposes and picking up the sort of anti-American sentiment that many Canadians hold is counterproductive. It's unhealthy. And so, yes, Canada needs to, in my view, to align with the United States and stop escalating. This sort of ad, although, like I said, professionally done, and it does use those words convincingly for free trade. This was an escalation that was unnecessary, a waste of money, and obviously Trump was not going to stand for it. So I don't know where the Premier of Ontario thought this was going to lead.
Okay, what do you think about this? Canadian Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand recently said that Canada views Beijing as a strategic partner. Do you think President Trump's decision could potentially drive Canada closer to countries like China?
There would be a huge price to pay for Canada to align more closely with China. They can do it, but they would be shooting themselves in the foot. Trump is building a transatlantic trade bloc, a US-centric or US-oriented trade bloc. So he wants to have all the Americas, all the European economies together. And this is his geopolitical strategy. He wants to have them align with the United States. And anyone who does not will pay a heavy price, right? The nucleus in the Americas of this pro-China alignment is Cuba and Venezuela. And obviously we can see right now that the temperature is rising heavily right now. So Canada could do that, but it would be an incredibly bad decision. In my mind, it would be a suicide mission. And it would be, so I just think they could, but I think that would lead to the Liberal Party of Canada being thrown out of office in short order.
Okay, Fergus, can you talk to us about this as well? Talk to us about Canada's internal politics, energy production, and trade beyond the United States.
Yes. Yeah, so the big challenge in Canada right now, and this is why I mentioned that Canada has both external free trade problems and internal free trade problems. In the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, there's a portion dedicated to free trade between the provinces, but this has never really been enforced. And there are all sorts of impediments, from occupational licensure and the most notably to just bringing alcohol between the provinces. But the real sticking point right now is on energy supplies, because Alberta is energy rich and wants to get its supplies to international markets. And in fact, this would give more leverage in the trade negotiations, because right now Canada has little choice but to export to the United States. There is a stalled pipeline project between Alberta and the British Columbia coastline that's been stuck for a long time. And it is like, there's so much to say about the Canadian challenges here, because really Canada is a very fractured nation, and Alberta, the energy producer of the country, is finding itself isolated from international markets and wanting to find independence, right? So to get more autonomy from Ottawa. And in particular, because the British Columbian Premier or British Columbian provincial government is impeding access to international markets, to tidewater or ocean water.
Okay, Fergus, just one last question here. Can you talk to us about what's on your radar, what's on the horizon for you before the USMCA review?
Yeah, so I've written about how Canada and Mexico can be better prepared for these negotiations. And again, as I said, this advertisement, albeit slick, was doing harm to that. And my contention is that Canada and Mexico can be in a stronger position. Both of them, they depend heavily on the United States. And what they can do is, one, don't pick a fight with the United States. They can focus on being in alignment. And in my view, it is healthy for both countries to do so. Second, they can diversify their own economy. They can look inward and see, as in Canada, why are we not utilizing our energy resources, not just in Alberta, but elsewhere, or our natural resources. And the same in Mexico. Under President AMLO, there was zero. There was not a single approval for new mining concessions. And this puts you in a weaker position, that if you have nothing to trade, no sort of highly valuable items, the United States can do without you and can walk away from any agreement and hurt you a great deal, whereas Mexico cannot walk away from the United States. And the third is that in between now and then, Canada and Mexico should look to open trade or work in other areas. So there's There are other trade deals or bilateral options they can go to make them slightly less dependent on the United States in the meantime in a healthy fashion. It doesn't hurt the United States that Canada and Mexico also trade with Australia or Japan or whatever it may be, other countries. And that would also mean there'd be less, that have a little bit, slightly more leverage when it comes to these negotiations or to the review in 2026.
Okay, well, Fergus, well said. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio continues his Israel visit today. Rubio addressed military forces this morning. He spoke about the International Gaza Security Force, which will be put in place under the current ceasefire agreement. Here's Rubio.
We haven't formed that force yet, so there's still work going on. There's a lot of countries that are offered to do it. Obviously, as you put together this force, it'll have to be people that Israel's comfortable, or countries that Israel's comfortable with as well.
Rubio added that the future of governance in Gaza still needs to be worked out among Israel and partner nations, but he made clear that it can't include the Hamas terrorist organization. According to Rubio, any potential role for the Palestinian Authority has yet to be determined. He traveled to Israel on Thursday with the goal of implementing President Trump's Gaza peace plan. Rubio arrived just after Vice President J.D. Vance's departure from the Middle East. And Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan also weighed in on the situation in Gaza. He says Turkey's military should join the Gaza Security Force while also playing an active role in the reconstruction of the enclave. NATO member Turkey is one of the most vocal critics of Israel's military action in Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu hinted that he'll be opposed to any role for Turkish security forces in the Gaza Strip. Erdogan also accuses Israel of violating the Gaza ceasefire deal. The Turkish president is calling on the United States and others to help stop the alleged violations, for example, through the use of sanctions. Ukrainian President Zelensky urged allies to supply his nation with long-range weapons to strike deeper into Russia. His allies are discussing how to finance Ukraine over the coming years, with debate and concerns over using frozen Russian assets. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson has more.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky meets British Prime Minister Keir Starmer in London. It comes ahead of a coalition of the willing meeting where allies discuss ways to support Ukraine. Zelensky called for long-range missiles to strike deeper into Russia.
Everything Putin does is an attempt to delay new forms of pressure. We must create in Russia a will to negotiate.
Ukraine uses its own weapons to hit energy and military facilities deep inside Russia. Zelensky has been seeking long-range Tomahawk missiles from the United States to increase pressure on Moscow, but has not yet obtained them. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer urged Ukrainian allies to use frozen Russian assets to strengthen Ukraine's hand for any future peace talks.
I think we need to agree to finish the job on Russia's sovereign assets and unlock billions to help finance Ukraine's defense.
European Union leaders agreed on Thursday to meet Ukraine's pressing financial needs for the next 2 years, but stopped short of endorsing the plan to use frozen Russian assets due to Belgian concerns. Moscow has promised a painful response if the Russian assets are seized. At a press conference, Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen said there are details to work out over how to finance reparations for Ukraine.
We have to work in a way that we have a solution before Christmas Eve, so we are able to ensure that we can finance Ukraine for the next years.
She said a consensus must be reached to provide Ukraine with the much-needed funds. On Wednesday, President Trump announced sanctions on Russia's two biggest oil companies. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said this shows Trump is absolutely committed to ending the war.
The sanctions that the US has placed against Russia's largest oil companies will starve them of revenue and significantly increase the pressure on Putin to come to the negotiating table.
Putin said the sanctions on oil companies were an unfriendly act, but would not significantly affect the Russian economy. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News.
As European leaders gather to discuss support for Kyiv, the fighting in Ukraine continues. At least 3 people are reported dead in Kherson after a massive shelling attack. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pastor has the war update.
Footage from the Ukrainian city of Kherson appears to show a Russian shelling attack on Friday. Explosions can be seen across the city. Ukrainian officials say at least 3 civilians are dead and over a dozen others are injured, including a 16-year-old. The attack reportedly damaged private homes, apartment buildings, and transportation and infrastructure facilities. Prosecutors say the attack amounts to another war crime committed by Russian forces. Meanwhile, Ukraine continues attacking Russian targets using drones. Ukraine has attacked Russian energy facilities more than 60 times since August. A senior Ukrainian commander says its drones are traveling over 1,200 miles in some cases. But Russia is getting better at intercepting them.
The enemy is waiting for us in certain places, carrying out countermeasures in order to reduce our success in long-range strikes.
And back home in Kiev, the widows of some fallen Ukrainian soldiers planted trees in a public park as a way to remember their sacrifice.
We have a small daughter left. Unfortunately, he died on her birthday. She was turning 3 years old that day. Now she is 5, and now only the 2 of us are left.
Another widow says they're naming the trees after the fallen soldiers so people will remember the sacrifices they made. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
A key figure in Ukraine's drone campaign targeting oil facilities deep inside Russia said Moscow was improving its ability to intercept them. But he said his unit was forging technology to keep one step ahead. Take a look.
Footage from Ukraine's special forces shows a drone strike on a fuel depot in Russian-occupied Crimea. Ukraine has attacked Russian energy facilities more than 60 times since August. The strikes have caused significant damage and disrupted the flow of oil through Russia's vast pipeline system. Some of those operations launch from here, an undisclosed location. A senior Ukrainian commander in the 14th Deep Strike Regiment told Reuters the unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs, were traveling more than 1,200 miles. But he said Russia was getting better at intercepting them.
We are dealing with a fairly skilled opponent. They have a high level of training, and they quickly adapt to our methods, to the tactics that we use. The enemy is waiting for us in certain places, carrying out countermeasures in order to reduce our success in long-range strikes.
The commander asked to be identified by his call sign, Charlie, in line with Ukrainian military practice. Drone warfare has changed rapidly since Russia's all-out invasion of Ukraine in early 2022, with both sides sending them across the front line and far behind it. Russia has used blizzards of them to reinforce missile attacks on Ukrainian energy infrastructure, seeking to knock out heating during the freezing winter months. Kiev focuses on long-range targets inside Russia to hit the energy system that fuels Russia's vast military. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky last week boasted of an increase in both distance and accuracy of long-range strikes. He estimated they were hitting Russian oil operations every other day, hoping to, quote, bring Russia back to reality. Russian officials have said no external pressure will force them to change course in the conflict.
Nevertheless, we are identifying weak spots, analyzing every operation, and implementing new technologies based on these analyses. This enables us to complete our missions successfully time and time again.
Charlie did not say how many drones were sent on each attack and how many were intercepted. He declined to discuss U.S. intelligence sharing, which has helped Ukraine successfully hit some of Russia's biggest oil installations.
The state of New York allocates $11 million towards emergency food relief. Funding will be going to equipment, food pantries, soup kitchens, and other programs. NTD Sean Marshall has more details.
$11 million worth of support for emergency food relief is going towards New Yorkers in need. Today, Governor Kathy Hochul made the announcement in a press release. And that more than $5 million in local emergency food relief equipment grants were awarded to nearly 100 not-for-profit organizations, including food pantries, soup kitchens, and other programs dedicated to assisting New Yorkers experiencing food insecurity across the state. In addition, more than $6 million will support a renewed partnership with Feeding New York State and the 10 regional food banks by funding critical staffing and essential operations at food banks and their local partners statewide. A total of 97 local emergency food relief equipment grants. Monetary amounts ranging from $1,200 to $100,000 will help organizations purchase emergency generators and equipment used for cooling and transporting donated food. Other goals are to expand the quantity and type of food that emergency food relief organizations can provide to New Yorkers in need. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
New York Attorney General Letitia James has entered pleas of not guilty at her Norfolk, Virginia federal court arraignment today. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
New York Attorney General Letitia James denied felony charges of bank fraud at her arraignment hearing on Friday. She pleaded not guilty to the fraud charges and a charge of making false statements to a financial institution. James is accused of attempting to defraud 2 financial institutions by falsely characterizing a 3-bedroom property in 2020. According to the indictment, she claimed the Norfolk, Virginia property was a secondary residence, but it was an investment property that she never planned to live in. She allegedly mischaracterized its use to secure better terms on her mortgage. After the arraignment, James made brief remarks outside of the courthouse.
And so I want to thank you. But this is not about me. This is about all of us. And about a justice system which has been weaponized. A justice system which has been used as a tool of revenge. This justice system which has been used as a tool of revenge and a weapon against those individuals who simply did their job and who stood up for the rule of law. And a justice system which unfortunately is nothing being used as a vehicle of retribution.
Ahead of the arraignment on Thursday, James' attorney filed motions urging the court to oust prosecutor Lindsay Halligan and block her from revealing details of the case to the media. A trial is set for January 26th. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries is backing Democratic nominee Zohran Mamdani in the New York City mayoral race. Jeffries shared a statement on X that says, in part, Zohran Mamdani has relentlessly focused on addressing the affordability crisis and explicitly committed to being a mayor for all New Yorkers, including those who do not support his candidacy. He went on to say, I support him and the entire citywide Democratic ticket in the general election. In response, Mamdani shared a statement that said, in part, I welcome Leader Jeffries' support and look forward to delivering a city government and building a Democratic Party, relentlessly committed to our affordability agenda. Joining us now is Santiago Vidal Calvo, a policy analyst at the Manhattan Institute. We're going to be discussing a key campaign policy of Democratic Socialist NYC mayoral hopeful Zohran Mamdani. So, Santiago, thank you for joining us today. I don't know if you know this already, but House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries actually endorsed Mamdani. But besides that, one of his promises is to raise New York City's hourly minimum wage from $16.50 to $30 by 2030. So let's start off here. Tell us, how does he plan to do this?
So first of all, thank you for the invitation. I think that what we need to realize is that such a drastic jump in the minimum wage would mean an economic blunder for the city. Essentially, what Mamdani wants to do is he wants to challenge Albany and pass a minimum wage proposal for the city, which has not been precedented except for delivery and grocery workers, which are a different kind of working employees. They're independent contractors. They're not employees, so they can raise that minimum wage. However, he wants to do this for the whole city. And that would mean that every single person now under $30 and over $30 would have a very different economic jump from that $16.50 that currently is the minimum wage to $30. And if I were above $30, I would also ask for a raise. So there's going to be a wage compression above that $30. it's going to have unintended consequences for that policy that he wants to pass.
That people making already $30 will ask for more. What do you think? What do you think here? Businesses, small businesses, what do you think they'll have to do if they're faced with this mandate?
Well, small businesses are going to be the first ones to suffer and are going to be the ones who suffer the most. There is one reality that this type of industry, especially retail, groceries, fast food chains, even healthcare, home healthcare, are industries that have very little earnings and profit margins. So essentially, what you would do is you would compress those profits and don't allow those businesses to grow. And even it get to a point where it's too expensive to hire the current workers. So what many businesses are going to end up doing is they're going to end up mobilizing their workforce, reducing it, or trying to keep the most valuable workers. And what Mamdani doesn't realize is that normally the people that are in minimum wage is because their employment is temporal or it's not as valuable as higher wages. So it's really an issue of how valuable that worker is for the small business and for those even larger corporations. And if they were to increase that minimum wage, those workers are going to be the ones who suffer the most, which unintendedly is also people with lower educational backgrounds, predominantly Hispanic and Black or non-white populations that are going to suffer in the outer boroughs of the city.
And small businesses, I would imagine they would have to be more selective as well, right? Because if I'm a small business and I have to hire somebody at $30 an hour, I want somebody who's ready to go. I don't want to be spending my time hiring somebody and then I have to train them before they're ready to make money for me.
Totally. There is going to be such a huge competition to keep the workers that are valuable at 30 and to essentially try to automate whatever it's left. Many businesses, around 48% of the businesses in New York City, are already having plans of automation. And what this is going to lead is that a lot of the small businesses that can change somebody in a fast food chain kiosk to an automated kiosk to order food, they're going to do that because it's going to be first cheaper, but second, they don't need to spend in that human capital to get that worker before with a value of $16.50 an hour to $30 of a value an hour. So there's going to be a big compression across the board. There's going to be an increasing competition. So you're going to have two effects at the same time. First, the effect of unemployment that this policy is going to cause. But second, the competition of all small businesses for these jobs that are left.
Would there be an impact on bigger businesses?
Totally. Some of the bigger corporations have very small profit margins that are also going to be impacted. You can already see it. Amazon has already moved to a fully automated system of stores. Target has implemented more self-pay kiosks around the city. Even something like Sweetgreens have already implemented something called the Infinite Kitchen, that it's a fully automated kitchen. So a lot of big corporations are also going to move in this direction. It's not only going to be small businesses.
So the messaging from Mamdani, it seems like that raising the minimum wage will lead to better reflecting the true cost of living. Would those currently be on minimum wage be better off because of this?
Not necessarily. So there is types of evidence in economic policy that suggests that something like a minimum wage increase would affect some people negatively and some other people positively. And the Congressional Budget Office actually did a great report a couple of years ago in which they explained something like this. They said if we were to raise the federal minimum wage across the states, how many people would lose employment? And they calculated it's almost 2 million people. But there is also a significant portion of people that are going to be increasing wages because those jobs are still needed. So not everybody's going to be affected. There's going to be a big portion of the population affected. But the ironic part here is that the people that he intends to help the most by passing a policy like this are going to be the ones the most affected. And that's the part that we're trying to save. If you want to increase affordability in the city, you can do it by deregulating the city market, the housing market. You can do it by making it more accessible for people to open small businesses and to create competition within markets. It's not by just simply saying we're going to arbitrarily choose minimum wage and say that. Because if he's choosing 30, then what stops him from choosing 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000. There's really nothing that stops him if he's just saying arbitrarily one number. So yes, we understand that the living cost of the city is really high, but there also needs to be an equivalent effect back of how do we make the city more affordable.
Okay, so Santiago, just one last question here, and by no means am I an economist or expert on this topic, but I'm just thinking here. If I'm a small business and I have to hire somebody at $30 an hour, I might have to raise the prices on my products. So if someone is making $30, maybe things that he has to buy will also increase.
Totally. Consumers are going to feel this, and it's going to be the most direct impact. And essentially, this minimum wage, more than a living wage for many workers that are going to move from $16.50 to $30, it's actually going to be also an impact to every single consumer across the board. Because I'm going to ask you a question. This is not economic logic. This is just basic logic. If I were to increase prices in the same way that I'm increasing the minimum wage, then why am I increasing the minimum wage? It's going to be the same at the end, because things are going to become more expensive. I'm going to get more money, but I'm still not going to be able to afford the city because the city is unaffordable. So at the end of the day, a policy like this needs to be very well thought out. And what I worry about is that they haven't really thought this well through, and they haven't realized the impact of a policy like this across the board in New York City.
Well, Santiago, it was a good conversation today. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you for the invitation.
The U.S. and Japan are set to sign a tech deal. The goal is to work together on advanced technologies. Nikkei newspaper is reporting that Tokyo and Washington will exchange a memorandum of understanding between ministers. This is set to take place during President Trump's visit to Japan next week. The MOU will include artificial intelligence, 5G telecom standards, pharmaceutical supply chains, quantum and space, and more. The move is partially over concern with China's rise in technology. Beijing has been heavily spending on tech research and development. This comes as Samsung and SoftBank have signed an MOU to work together on 6G, AI RAN, and large telecom model research. The team-up is meant to advance next-generation communication technologies. Police arrested a man who pointed a knife at them in front of the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo today. Japan is ramping up security ahead of President Trump's visit in a few days. A man was taken into custody after pointing a knife, a kitchen knife, that is, at anti-riot police officers on the street. During the arrest, one officer was injured in his right heel by the suspect's knife. The man's motive was not immediately known. The incident comes days before Trump's planned trip to Japan beginning October 27th. He will meet with Emperor Naruhito and newly elected Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi. The Tokyo Police Department has mobilized up to 18,000 personnel to bolster security for the visit. Japan has seen multiple attacks on high-profile politicians in recent years. Former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was killed by a homemade gun in 2022, and a failed bomb attack targeted then Premier Fumio Kishida in 2023. Dodger fans across Southern California are showing their pride ahead of the 2025 World Series. In Santa Monica, the city turned blue for a special celebration for the fans. NTD's Christina Corona takes us there.
We're here in Santa Monica on the 3rd Street Promenade. As you can see behind me is a sea of Dodger blue. Fans from all over LA County came out for the first ever We Believe in Blue Dodgers pep rally ahead of our boys in blue heading to the World Series. From live entertainment to special guests and prizes, there's something for every fan to enjoy.
Go Dodgers!
Yay! Go Dodgers!
The event was hosted by the City of Santa Monica and Downtown Santa Monica, Inc., drawing a huge crowd of fans Thursday night. Former Dodger legends Steve Garvey, Eric Karros, and Adrian Gonzalez took the stage and even had the fans singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game."
Take me out to the ball game. Take me out to the crowd.
Eric Karros, the LA Dodgers' all-time home run leader with 270 home runs, talks about Dodgers' current season leader, Shohei Ohtani.
Now, Shohei is truly, I would sit here and say, greatest all-around baseball player to ever don a uniform, to ever play.
The former players also signed autographs and took photos with fans. Fans enjoyed live music, a 360-degree photo booth, an 8-foot-tall Dodger baseball to take pictures with, and even a beer garden, all as excitement builds for Game 1. The Dodgers now have a chance to become baseball's first repeat World Series champions in 25 years after sweeping the Milwaukee Brewers in the NLCS.
We're going to win 2 years in a row, yes.
So excited. We already knew we have to have faith. We believe in our boys. Best feeling ever.
And when it comes to favorite players, the crowd made it clear.
Ohtani, yeah, and Freddie Freeman.
Shohei Ohtani. Shohei.
Kershaw. That's it. I could care less what everyone says. Whether he wins or loses, he's still a champion.
As night fell, the Santa Monica skyline lit up in Dodger blue, wrapping up a full night of team pride and celebration. Every World Series game will be streamed from the Promenade's entertainment zone, where fans can bring a beach chair, grab a drink, and watch all the action.
Go Dodgers!
So many fans are decked out in Dodger gear, ready to cheer on the Dodgers as they take on the Toronto Blue Jays for Game 1 of the World Series. Reporting from the city of Santa Monica, Christina Corona, NTD News.
The United States continues attacking drug traffickers who are trying to smuggle narcotics into the United States. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth reported the latest strike this morning. Hegseth says the Department of War carried out a lethal kinetic strike on a vessel operated by Tren de Aragua, a designated terrorist organization, trafficking narcotics in the Caribbean Sea. According to the Secretary of War, the vessel was traveling along a known trafficking route and carrying narcotics. The strike was reportedly conducted in international waters. 6 male narco-traffickers were aboard the vessel during the strike. They all died in the attack. Hegseth says no U.S. forces were harmed in the strike. The Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group is now embarking to international waters in Latin America to assist with the operations. The strike group includes a carrier air wing, a cruiser, and multiple destroyers. And at yesterday's roundtable event, a reporter questioned why Trump doesn't get Congress's approval to take out drug traffickers. Here's the president.
I think we're just going to kill people that are bringing drugs into our country. Okay, we're going to kill them. You know, they're going to be like dead. Okay.
President Trump also spoke about China yesterday. Trump says the Chinese regime is smuggling fentanyl into the United States through Venezuela. The president says the aim is to bypass U.S. and Mexican controls.
So I'm meeting with President Xi, and I would say we have some big issues, like with the farmers and various other things. But the first question I'm going to be asking him about is fentanyl. And if you think about it, they make $100 million. Think of this. They make $100 million selling fentanyl into our country, $100 million. They lose $100 billion with the 20% tariff. So it's not a good business proposition. It's $100 billion approximately that they have to pay. That's a big penalty to make $100 million.
Trump will meet Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping next week as part of a trip to Asia. The president departs for Malaysia late tonight and will also visit South Korea, where he will meet Xi next Thursday. FBI Director Kash Patel told lawmakers earlier this year he had spoken to counter-narcotics authorities in China. Patel urged them to restrict exports of more fentanyl precursor chemicals. The Chinese Ministry of Public Security in August added 7 chemicals to an export control list, 3 of them central to producing fentanyl. Washington's most wanted Chinese drug lord was finally arrested in Cuba and is now waiting to be extradited to the United States through Mexico. The U.S. government is accusing him of supplying fentanyl to the 2 biggest Mexican cartels and building a multi-continental criminal network whose operations spread across America. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has more.
The Chinese narco broker's name is Zhang Dongji, also known as Brother Wang. He was born in Beijing. U.S. authorities say Zhang had built a massive narco traffic network, which directly supplies to 2 Mexican cartels for nearly a decade. The Trump administration designated the 2 cartels as terrorist groups earlier this year. The U.S. government says Zhang's operatives are scattered across states like California, Georgia, as well as Latin America, Europe, and Asia. This way, Zhang's organization smuggled nearly 4,000 pounds of fentanyl and over 2,000 pounds of cocaine from Mexico into the U.S. Such a massive amount of fentanyl can kill approximately 900 million people, almost triple the U.S. population. The Trump administration has doubled down its pressure on Beijing to stop fueling the opioid crisis, especially fentanyl, and even slapped 20% tariffs on Chinese goods as punishment. But despite the tariff in place, U.S. federal agencies last month intercepted 1,300 barrels of precursor chemicals shipped from China before they could poison Americans.
These 1,300 barrels were shipped from Shanghai, China to Mexico. We intercepted these precursors on the high seas, and now the Sinaloa cartel will not be able to use them to make methamphetamines. And the bottom line is this: whenever there is an effort on the part of foreign terrorist organizations to create drugs that are killing Americans, we will seize them, whether it's on the high seas or whether it's in the country or a foreign country.
Back to Zhang's story, the drug trafficking business is only half of his business model. As an operator of Zhang's, who was arrested in the U.S., disclosed, after Zhang's Mexican operatives collected money from drug dealers, they used Zhang's shell companies based in China and the U.S. for money laundering. U.S. officials say Zhang has 150 shell companies and almost 200 bank accounts. An indictment against Zhang says he laundered $20 million in the U.S. within 1 year. Court documents show Zhang tends to start bank accounts with reputable banks like Bank of America, JP Morgan, or Wells Fargo. But what's really raising eyebrows is Zhang's connection to the Chinese Communist Party. The Bureau reported that Zhang once flew into Canada's Vancouver back in 2017, and he saved contacts from the Chinese embassy and consulate in Ottawa and Vancouver in his phone. Now, the U.S. has never been this close to bringing the Chinese drug kingpin to justice after he managed to escape the last arrest. Media reports say Zhang will be extradited to the U.S. as soon as he touches Mexican soil, after the Cuban authorities finish their current interrogation.
The Pentagon has confirmed a 9th strike on a drug smuggling vessel as part of its campaign against foreign terrorist organizations in the Western Hemisphere. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Eduardo Martinez, has more.
Not war, not war, not war. Just peace, just peace, just peace, forever, forever, forever. Peace forever.
Nicolás Maduro, the leader of the Venezuelan regime and the leader of the cartel of the Suns, has publicly pleaded for peace with the United States, while at the same time, Maduro launched an app in Venezuela so that those loyal to the regime can report on dissent. Maduro has also deployed the military nationwide in preparations for a potential confrontation with the United States.
Operation against narco-terrorists, as the Department of War characterizes them, the Al-Qaeda of the Western Hemisphere. They come through the Caribbean with the full assistance and cooperation of the illegitimate government of Venezuela, the Cartel de los Soles, which is run by Nicolás Maduro.
The Department of War has now confirmed a 9th strike on a drug smuggling vessel operated by Tren de Aragua, which has close ties to the Maduro regime.
This is a national security problem. They killed 300,000 people last year, these drugs coming in. They killed 300,000 Americans last year, and that gives you legal authority.
The Southern District of New York indicted Nicolás Maduro and a bunch of other people in his regime for being they're a transshipment organization.
The Department of War also confirmed it has deployed the USS Gerald Ford aircraft carrier group to the South Caribbean Sea.
And that's why changing the dynamic and actually taking kinetic strikes on these boats ought change the psychology of these foreign terrorist organizations.
Look, you're never going to interdict your way out. That's extremely expensive and resource intensive, and it hasn't worked for decades. So the idea of trying something new, and yes, it is against a terrorist organization. They act like terrorists, that's for sure. And you can quibble about whether it's criminal or terroristic activity. In the end, we have all the authority we need to strike them.
When the Gerald S. Ford carrier strike group arrives in the South Caribbean Sea, the U.S. will have 13 destroyers, a nuclear submarine, an aircraft carrier, and its entire air wing, and 10 additional F-35 fighters in the region. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Homeland Security Advisor Stephen Miller is giving a gaggle at the White House. Let's take a look.
Angry candidate? The president has been very clear about his extreme displeasure with what took place, and I will leave it to the president to provide an update on that.
Can I ask about the USS Trump is considering plans to target cocaine facility and drug trafficking routes inside Venezuela? Can you speak to that? And given that Venezuela is not a cocaine-producing country, can you explain what the plans are there?
Well, so obviously I would not now or ever get into any detailed discussion to address any of the things mentioned in your question in any way. But I do want to address the broader issue of narcotics and the war on cartels and foreign terrorist organizations. So Venezuela, of course, is a central hub for narcotics trafficking across the Western Hemisphere. Also weapons trafficking, also human trafficking as well too. And we know that the Maduro regime is the Cartel de Sols, which is a recognized and designated narco-trafficking organization, and also Tren de Aragua is a recognized FTO, foreign terrorist organization. And so this is a central hub of terrorist activity across the Western Hemisphere. And just more broadly, as was made clear in the event yesterday, the President of the United States has made clear that narco-terrorists and narco-trafficking is a terrorist activity.